sad to report that two of my officers were killed in a line of duty, and an innocent citizen also lost their life. Two suspects responsible for these deaths are also deceased.
It is all too often we lead a story with the phrase senseless shooting, and what happened over the weekend in Las Vegas tragically fits this perfectly. In this case, it was much more than a domestic shooting or something so seemingly random. In this case, it was a pair of police officers having their lunch that were the target of killers now thought to be part of a white supremacist faction. We are once again, unfortunately, asking ourselves what can be done, if anything, to protect a population that is so helpless when confronted with such violence. Joining us here on Midpoint is the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center and author of the book, More Guns, Less Crime. It is a pleasure to welcome John Lott into Midpoint. John, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks very much for having me on.
Your book, I'm going to get to in a moment here, but let's just get to the event as to what happened in Las Vegas. It is, and I continue to use that phrase, so senseless. But you have looked at a lot of these statistics and a lot of events like this. Is it not fair to say that there simply was nothing that could have been done to prevent this, to see it coming? This was just one of those random things that just are senseless. I cannot think of any other word just to point it out, but we can't prevent these.
Well, it could have been a lot worse than it was. One of the things that wasn't mentioned by the comment by the police chief that you just had was the citizen who was killed had a permanent concealed handgun, exchanged fire with the two killers and wounded one of the attackers. It was shortly after that that the attackers committed suicide.
So there are those who are going to ask then, does this point out that an armed populace, a legally armed populace, could help to stop something like this?
I think so. And I think if you go and you look at the other recent cases, the killers themselves believe that that's the case. I just give you a couple quotes. You have the Santa Barbara killer. He put together a 141-page manifesto. But what's not really mentioned is if you actually read the manifesto, several times in there, he makes it very clear that he wants to avoid people who can stop him, who have guns. I'll just give you one of the quotes. He says, in trying to decide what venue to go and do his attack, he says, quote, "Another option was Deltopia, a day in which young people pour in from all over the state to have a spring break party on Del Playa Street. I figured this would be the perfect day to attack Isla Vista. But watching YouTube videos of previous Deltopia parties, I saw that there were way too many cops walking around on such an event. It would be impossible to kill enough of my enemies before being dispatched by those damnable cops," end quote. I don't know, the Canadian shooter last week had very similar feelings. On his Facebook page, he had a number of comics dealing with gun-free zones. Just one of the comics, for example, depicted a completely defenseless victim pleading with a man at gunpoint, and the victim was saying, "But wait, there's a gun ban in the city. You can't do this.
Okay, but let me stop there for a second here, because I'm going to now play a little devil's advocate here into what a lot of people will say. They will say, okay, fine, you want to have people that are armed and legally armed, and according to a comment that you made on a story not long ago, you said, is it so hard for reporters to understand that killers like to attack victims where they can't protect themselves? All right, let's put that in as part of the mix here, though. There are those who are going to say that we understand legal gun owners and that the fact that there could be legal gun owners that may stop a crime like this. But the critics will say some of those legal gun owners are the ones themselves committing the crimes, that there have been mass killings done by people who are legal owners. So how do you stop this? How do you stop them from becoming the ones that are committing the crimes?
All right, well, the problem is that these people are planning these attacks months or even years in advance. You have something like the Santa Barbara killer was planning it well over a year and a half in advance. It's very common for them to be planning it over a year in advance. And the question is, how do you stop them from being able to go and get weapons? The problem with these types of gun laws that you have are that they're obeyed by law-abiding good citizens, not someone who's intent on trying to go and do these types of harm. And when you go and you pass rules to the extent that you disarm the law-abiding good citizens, the people who are intent on defending themselves, not intent on causing the harm, you make it easier for those who are trying to commit the harm. So
Okay, then. So let's get to this then. How do you then dig out of this roster of people who, at the time when they purchase their guns, they purchase them legally? They go to the store, they do it exactly as the law tells them to. It seems we hear a lot about these people who are purchasing the guns legally, then later they become the killers. They become part of the problem here. So how do we get down to that part of it right there and stop the people who may commit? See, all of a sudden we're becoming soothsayers here. We seem to need a crystal ball to get in here and try to figure out who is going to eventually commit a crime, correct?
right. Well, you know, these killers very often have explosives, have other things that are illegal for them to go and have. So, you know, you're not stopping them from getting other methods that they're using to go and kill people. There's been some talk recently about trying to spend even more money on mental health type issues. The problem is that when you go and you look at these killers, you find that time after time, they're seeing psychiatrists at the time of the killing. Psychiatrists have a very difficult job here, but they themselves recognize the problem. There's a large literature in the psychiatric profession on how many mistakes there are, how incredibly difficult it is for them to go and identify people who are actually going to be harm to others.
So we're getting into this discussion again about psychological testing. And again, I'm going to open up another part of this whole discussion here that says that there are those who feel that if you're going to legally purchase a gun, you should have to undergo some form of psychological testing. And of course, there are many who fight that and say that is completely unnecessary. But aren't we sort of leading ourselves there in this discussion, saying that that just may be what's necessary?
Well, I guess what I was just saying is that if you go and read what the psychiatrists write about this, and I just had a piece in the New York Post that people can see by going to crimeresearch.org with Arthur Berg, who was a professor for decades at the Harvard Medical School, professor of psychiatry. The psychiatrists themselves say that they just are not able to go and identify people who are really a threat to other people. And you see that in these mass shooting cases. The Santa Barbara killer, he was seeing one of the most renowned psychiatrists in the country. And yet that person wasn't able to go and identify the fact that the Santa Barbara killer was a threat to others. You know, anybody from Adam Lanza to the Virginia Tech killer to many others that could be named were seeing psychiatrists. And yet none of those psychiatrists viewed their patients as being a significant threat to other people.
Okay, a couple of minutes we have left here. I know that you've spoken at Seattle Pacific University, and that campus has been designated a gun-free zone. Now, there are those who will say that that is supposed to keep people safe if you are not allowed to have any guns by anybody in a zone anywhere, certainly, but I know that this is something that you completely disagree with, correct?
Right, well, it gets back to the quotes that we had earlier. I mean, I can go and give you lots of quotes from these attackers who go and specifically target places where victims aren't able to go and defend themselves. They want to kill lots of people. They want to go and get media attention. They know that they can do that by killing lots of people. And so they go and pick targets where they can kill a lot of people before they can be stopped. These guys want to get attention, and that's the way for them to go and get it. We could, you know, if people want to go and stop these types of things, one way to try to do that is to cut back on the attention, whether that means the media voluntarily stops mentioning their name all the time, or whether you were to change the First Amendment. I'm not arguing doing that, but my guess is that would end up being a lot more effective in terms of stopping these types of attacks. I mean, just read the manifesto for the Santa Barbara killer. Time after time after time, he's talking about not being appreciated, that he wants to get more attention. And that's chillingly what you find in these guys. They know, you know, the Newtown killer, he had put together a 7.5 by 4 foot Excel spreadsheet that went through past mass shootings, the amount of media attention that they got, how many people were killed or injured, and he graphed out the relationship between how many people get killed and the amount of media attention, finding the obvious relationship there. And according to police, he had pointed to the Norway killer, who holds the unfortunate record of having the most people killed, ignoring the bombing deaths. He shot to death 69 people and wounded 110 others. And he wanted to go and exceed his killings so that he could get even more worldwide media attention.
All right, John, we're going to go ahead and leave it right there. But as you've indicated, you brought up a number of things here. This is another subject that's not going to go away anytime soon. John, again, is the author of More Guns, Less Crime. John, thank you so much for joining us. This is Midpoint, where our motto is very simply, question everything. After the break, I'll be talking to an attorney at the Independent Women's Forum, Gail Trotter. And certainly we'll bring some Obama administration acts into it as well.
Federal and state